My name is Greg Neagle. I work for Disney Animation Studios. I see a lot of familiar faces out here, hopefully friendly. And I see some new faces too, which is good. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about what's new in Munki, but because there's some new faces, I don't necessarily know who knows what about Munki. Let's do a quick little overview. Munki is an open source software management system for Mac OS, and it allows you to manage software installations, updates, and removals. And it features a very familiar App Store looking interface. It's been around 15 years or so. And I started work on Munki at Disney Animation Studios back in late 2008. Can you spot me in that photo? Not the best. Enhance, good. Maybe Claude could make that look like something. You can find Munki on GitHub, where it's free to download and use. And here's kind of how it works. The Munki client runs on each Mac, and all the smarts are on the client side. The server is the dumb standard web server, and the clients talk to that web server to find out what to do. And since the Munki server is just a standard dumb web server, it can run on virtually any hardware or VM, any operating system. It can even run in the cloud. And the web server contains the packages and disk images that are to be installed and some plist formatted text files that describe the software that's to be installed and also which machines get which software. And Munki's in use all over the world in organizations large and small, K through 12, public universities, small mom and pop shops, giant FANG, or what's the current thing? It used to be FANG, now it's something else. These giant organizations like Facebook and Google, that sort of. It would be strange if we didn't use it, but we do. And although Munki is open source and you can use it for free, it's also been incorporated in several commercial products. And here's a few examples. Workspace ONE, which was formerly known as AirWatch, uses Munki at the core for its software installation management on Mac OS. Simple MDM has a Munki implementation. And even Jamf has integrated Munki. It's part of their Jamf auto update service. So Munki's pretty mature at this point. I mean, it's not old enough to drink in most US states, but it could get a driver's license and drive a car, maybe. So let's talk a little bit about Munki 7. Munki 7 was released early last October, and it contains the single largest number of changes ever to the Munki code base. But most of those changes are, or at least should be, pretty much invisible to you. Let's start with the command line tools. By the way, does anybody know what flavor of ice cream this is? Munki business.
At the creamery?
Yes.
Oh,
yes. I didn't actually, see, I do, like, we go back a little bit, I've got the, well, there we go. I've got photos of ice cream I've eaten. I don't think I've ever actually eaten the Munki business, so I didn't have a photo of that.
Yeah, today's the day.
Today might be that day. Although I already had some from the truck. I don't know, do I need a second one today? Me?
Right,
right. Anyway, in Munki 7, that big chunk of changes in Munki 7 is because all of the command line tools have been rewritten from Python into Swift. So that's tens of thousands of lines of code, all changed. The nice thing is they're now signed, compiled, notarized binary executables. And you shouldn't care at all, because the tools should pretty much operate exactly the same. They have the same names, mostly the same options, and their behavior is exactly as before. You should be able to use the Munki 7 command line tools without needing to learn anything new. Manage software update, Munki import, icon importer, manifest util, all those tools still there, still work the same. Let it finish up here. Yes, almost done. Now we're going to rebuild the calculus. Okay, good. So because the Munki command line tools are now all compiled, they can also be signed, which should make your security folk happier. It's a good thing from a security perspective that all the code in managed software update is signed, because it makes it far more difficult for a bad actor to slip in some malware when you had hundreds of Python files, not only the ones that are part of the Munki project, but just the ones that are part of the Python distribution. Lots of places for malware to sneak in there. This eliminates all of that since it's a compiled executable that's signed. And because all the tools can be signed with that same developer ID, we can take this mess, if you've seen this on your machine, and turn it into this, which looks much nicer to us. I think the end users still don't care, but we as admins, oh, this looks better. We like this. And even though most of the changes in the Munki command line tools are internal implementation changes because of just rewriting the code, there is one new feature that was added in Munki 7.0's command line tools, and that's version script. And to understand what that's for, one of the things Munki does each time it runs is figure out what software needs to be installed or updated. And to see if software needs to be updated, it needs to know the version of the software that's currently installed. So there's a lot of ways that Munki can do that. And in the package info item, you tell Munki how to find that out. A real common way is to use what's called an installs array. And in this example, what we're telling Munki to do is check the version of the application bundle at applications Google Chrome.app. Look for the version information inside that bundle. Munki can also check the versions of package receipts. So software that drops a receipt that has sane versioning, you can check that. But sometimes there are items that they just don't have a nice, easy way to read the version off a disk. So you might have to use a script to determine if something needs to be installed or updated. And for a very long time, probably since almost the beginning, Munki has supported an install check script. And this is just a script that returns a yes/no value. Yes, this item needs to be installed, or no, it doesn't. And in this particular script, we're trying to determine if we need to update the argparse module for Python 3. So we actually run the argparse module and asking for its version, print that out, or parse that, and if it's one thing, we can exit 0. If it's the other thing, we can exit 1. The problem here is that we're doing version comparisons in a script. And versions are really just strings. We kind of intuitively look at them and we know what's bigger or smaller, but computers are very literal about that, so it's very easy to get this wrong. So as an example here, we've got a script that's going to compare two strings that we're calling version numbers, 1.1 versus 1.2.1. And so if we run it, okay, it does the right thing. It says 1.1 is less than 1.2.1, good. Let's try a different one, 1.3. And okay, that's right too. 1.3 is not less than 1. Okay, now let's see if we can throw a little curveball here. 1.10, 1.1.0. I don't think anybody in this room is going to be terribly shocked to find out that it doesn't do that right. Because it's just doing a literal, okay, 1's the same, okay, the period's the same, okay, oh, 1's smaller than 2, okay, I'm done. It's less. But that's wrong, because we assign meaning to it that the computer doesn't. So there's a lot of ways to get around this, and you can make your shell script even more complex, or you can use Z shell, which has a few more functions that help with this sort of thing. But Munki itself knows how to compare version strings, so let's just let Munki do it. And so that's what version script lets you do. It's just a script that prints the version number. That's all it does. And we feed that back into Munki, and Munki then can use its own version comparison routines to compare those versions. So much simpler script here where we just have it print out its version number. We can stick it in a package info. So now it's going to compare whatever that version script prints out against the version 1.2.1. So it's just a little bit simpler. You can avoid a lot of the pitfalls around doing version comparison with a version script. This also handles the case where there's an error or nothing is output. Like if the thing isn't installed at all, it's probably going to throw an error when it tries to print the version. That will work as well. So there's one other major reason why you might use a version script rather than an install check script. Packages that use an install check script can't be used as managed updates because an install check script can only say, yes, you should install this, or no, you shouldn't. With a managed update, what we're doing first is looking to see if any version of the software is installed and if it's older than the one that we want to install so we can update it. With an install check script, you can't get that information. It doesn't tell you, yes, there's an older version installed. It just would tell you yes or no. So instead, if you use a version script, that will work fine with managed installs. And I have some builds that I forgot to click on, but it gives you the idea here. So also in Munki 7, there were some updates to the GUI tools. In Mac OS Tahoe, managed software centers now have amazing new corner radiuses. I mean, look at those amazing curves, right? Of course, nobody liked that, so in Golden Gate, they go right back to the way they looked before. I didn't do that, that's Apple, right? Also spent a lot of time making sure we could get this lovely floating glass look in Tahoe, but of course, in Golden Gate, back to the way it was before again, so that was a couple of weeks of work I'll never get back. In Mac OS Tahoe, menu items have icons. In Golden Gate, some of them don't again. So, you know, you try to do what Apple wants you to do, and sometimes resistance isn't futile, but I didn't resist in this case. I wish I'd resisted on this one. There's a new application icon for Managed Software Center in Munki 7. I really did like the old icon. I know some people did, and they thought, oh, it doesn't look like every other. That's why I liked it. Different shape, kind of stands out, looks different. I don't think I really like the idea that every icon has to have this shape. And so they all end up looking the same. But with Tahoe, and I think also with Golden Gate, if you don't acquiesce to Apple's demands and stick your icon in this shape, this is what they do to your icon. They shrink it down and stick it inside a squircle. So now, this is what it would look like in the dock. So it's even harder to see because the icon itself has shrunk down. So felt I pretty much had to redesign the icon. And whether you like the new look in Tahoe or not, at least it looks more at home. It looks like it belongs there. So that's the GUI change there. And I have to say, I'm not the only one who thinks forcing every icon into a squircle jail is a good idea. These articles all popped up within the last week. I don't know why suddenly people started complaining about the squircles once again, but I guess maybe because they were disappointed that Apple didn't backtrack on that during Golden Gate as well. All right, more changes to the GUI in Munki 7. Since Managed Software Center was introduced in 2014 with Munki 2, you've been able to customize the banner images and helpful links near the top, helpful links at the bottom, and even where the help menu points to. In Munki 5.2, we introduced this navigation sidebar, largely because that's what the Apple's App Store did at that time as well. But you've never been able to customize this until Munki 7. And so Munki 7 adds support for customizing that sidebar, and most of the work was done by Steve Kung. He had the idea, he really wanted to do it for his environment, so he wrote up most of the code, and we kind of iterated back and forth a bit, but most of the implementation is his. So in Munki 7, admins can now customize this sidebar, and they can add, remove, or rearrange items in there. Now, by default, the items are exactly the same, so if you do nothing, it'll still work like it did before. But you can add additional items, like you might add a link to your help desk's web page. Or you can replace all of them. You can give them different names, different icons, add as much as you want. I don't know that we've tested what happens if you add like 400 of them and it goes off the bottom, so just don't do that. But this gives you a way to maybe bring more helpful resources for users into a single place. You want to encourage them to look at one place as much as possible and not have to look around for different resources. And there's a couple of ways you can set this sidebar configuration. You can do it via preferences. So which means that you can use a configuration profile. So there are new preferences in the manage installs domain that you can set. Or if you're already customizing other parts of the Managed Software Center interface and you're creating a customization archive, you can add a file to that archive that will also get you a customized sidebar. And you can learn more about customizing the Managed Software Center sidebar on the Munki Wiki. I'm going to mention the Wiki a lot because I want people to use the Wiki. A lot of people have contributed to that documentation. We try to keep it up to date as much as possible. I think it's halfway decent, and what's nice is it's editable by anybody, so if you find a mistake, you can fix it, you can add to it. But it's nice to have that documentation. So let's do a little demo here of the custom sidebar. Let's try this out. We're going to go over and we're going to click this Clean My Mac. Do this sort of thing. But,
It's called a hustle, sweetheart.
Now, as part of the rewrite or of the port, there was a lot of code that had been building up for 15 years or so that I just didn't really want to carry over and continue to support. I didn't think either it was no longer useful or it would be really difficult to test and make sure that it actually continued to work. So there were definitely things that didn't make the cut, and there are things that have dropped out of Munki 7. Munki 6.7 supported 9 years of Mac OS, all the way from High Sierra through to Tahoe. With Munki 7, we used some Swift features that weren't easily supportable in anything before Catalina, so we dropped support before that. The plan is to support Golden Gate. Early testing, I haven't seen any problems. It seems what we have right now seems to work just fine with Golden Gate. Huge change. Munki 7, since it was rewritten in Swift, all of it, it doesn't need Python, so we're no longer dependent on Python. We no longer ship a Python interpreter with Munki. And if you're upgrading, if you have clients that are already running Munki 6 and you upgrade them to Munki 7, that Python interpreter won't disappear. But if you're setting up a new machine and Munki 7 is the first thing that's installed on there, no older version was ever installed before that, there isn't going to be that Munki Python interpreter. So you might think, well, so what? Munki doesn't require Munki Python anymore, so is it important that it's not there anymore? It might if you have other scripts or other tools that uses that. I know I, for years, recommended people don't rely on that Munki Python for anything else, but I did, and I'm sure other people did as well. And a big example is Munki Facts, which people would use to extend Munki's ability to do smart group-like things and conditional items and that sort of thing. Those were all written in Python, and so they don't work in Munki 7 unless you ensure that Munki Python framework is installed. You could continue to do that, or you could move to a new tool written by Per Olsen, also known as Magervulp. And he's basically taken the Munki Facts scripts and converted them all to Bash. And so they just run on the Bash that macOS ships. Of course, that probably means in macOS 28, Apple will drop Bash, and then we'll have to do this all over again. If you use Munki to help upgrade macOS on your fleet, you need to know that the Start OS installer type, which was used to upgrade macOS on Intel Macs, it's no longer supported. There's still another way to install macOS. It's called stage_OS_installer. That works on both Apple Silicon and Intel. It's still supported in Munki 7. Of course, macOS 27 doesn't work on Intel anyway, so dropping support for that was sort of a no-brainer. But I think longer term, you should be thinking more about using something like DDM to manage these sort of updates. Munki 6 could install most Apple software updates on Intel hardware, but generally couldn't install them on Apple Silicon, because to install a Mac OS update on Apple Silicon, you need the credentials of a volume owner. And I didn't really want to get into the business of prompting the user for their credentials, so instead we just show them that there's an update available, and then we kick them over to the software update preferences pane in system settings, system preferences, and let them do it there. So in Munki 7, we extend that behavior to both Intel and Apple Silicon. In both cases, Munki does not attempt to install those, just kicks them over to the software update pane. Again, longer term, this is probably something you want to manage via DDM. Adobe. Prior to Munki 7, Munki supported all sorts of unique Adobe installation methods. Adobe seemed to come out with a new one about once a year, people would tell them, oh, we don't like what you're doing now. Okay, we've got a new one. We don't like that one either. Well, we got a new. Eventually they figured out, oh, people want packages. And so, so finally now, you can pretty much reliably install Adobe software by generating a package using their admin console. So we've dropped all of that support. If you need to use Munki to install Adobe software, you need to generate a package using the admin console. Some software, like the Creative Cloud desktop, and I think Acrobat Pro, and maybe Reader, or maybe I'm turning those around. They're already available in package format. You don't have to do anything special, but most of the other stuff, Photoshop, Illustrator, that sort of thing, you've got to use that extra tool. And I think a lot of people have moved away from using Munki to install any of that stuff at all. Where I am right now, we use Munki to install the Creative Cloud desktop app, and then users install whatever they have licenses for themselves from using that interface. Don't love it, but less work for me, and it seems to mostly work. Munki 7 drops all support for configuration profiles. Now, this hasn't worked since Big Sur, because Apple yanked the ability of the profiles command line tool to install profiles. So it seemed like, okay, we're making a big transition here. I'm not going to bother porting that code over since it doesn't work. So little summary here of the big changes, the big stuff that was removed from Munki 7. There's many other smaller changes, and again, if you go to the Munki wiki, you can find details about those things. I didn't ask, and I'm going to ask right now, how many people in this room are still running Munki 6 or earlier? Okay, not zero. So there's things you need to think about and pay attention to when you make that change. All right, that was Munki 7. Let's look at Munki 7.1, which was released in April of this year. And it contains a few big changes, and the biggest one was this. Several years ago, this feature request was created in the GitHub issues, but people had actually been talking about this like on some of the discussion lists and stuff for a while. This is a need or a desire people have had for quite a long time. Can Manage Software Center quit the apps that are blocking them and let the install and then relaunch the apps? Prior to that, it would just tell you that things need to be quit, but it didn't help you at all. And I thought it was a good idea. I liked the idea. I just really had, one, no idea how to begin to implement the user interface. And two, I had so many other things I wanted to work on that it just always went to the back of the line. And so it just sat there in the to-do list for years and years and years. But early this year, Jordan Calhoun, which he's sitting in the front here, so you can all, congratulate him or thank him later. Jordan did the tough work, which is get something going, get something started, and he opened a pull request with an implementation of this feature. And there was a couple of months of just kind of going back and forth and tweaking it and making sure it worked for languages other than English. That's actually one of the, anytime anybody wants a UI change to Manage Software Center, that's a huge slowdown for me, because you can't go, well, okay, it works in American English, that's good enough. There are people all over the world that use it, and so I have to make sure that all of those, anything new added to the GUI has to be localized to like 11 or 12 different languages. Maybe 13 or 14 if you count British English and Australian English, and Canadian English as different languages, right, Nindy? Yeah, right. But, you know, little iteration, we had to move some stuff around, make sure we had enough room for some of the long words in German and Swedish and some of these other languages. And then the feature shipped as part of Munki 7.1. And here's how it works. In this example, both Google Chrome and iTerm are open. And so Munki cannot update them in the background quietly. So it notifies the user of available updates. And Managed Software Center here is showing you those updates. The user clicks Update All. And prior to Munki 7.1, you'd get this dialog. It would just tell you, hey, there's a couple apps that are open. You should probably quit those. Most users would go, I don't want to do that. They'd click OK, and then they'd go on with their life. And they wouldn't ever close the apps. They would never update. Or they would complain about it bitterly about, oh, I had to hit Command Q. But with Munki 7.1, and this is optional, the admin can opt into this. You can let Munki, or you can let Managed Software Center assist them with the onerous task of quitting those apps. They can click the Quit Apps and Update button, and it'll quit the apps, update them, and if you've got that Reopen Apps After Update box checked, it'll reopen them for you. And consider this scenario as well. Here we've got 3 pending updates. Chrome and iTerm are running and blocking installation. Visual Studio Code is not running, and I'm the user, and like, I don't really care about Chrome or iTerm, but I really want that new version of Visual Studio Code right now. But if I quit Chrome, I'm going to lose all my tabs. So I'm so mad. They can, again, at the user's or at the admin's discretion, we can enable this. A new button, Skip and Update Others. So if they click that, the 2 blocking apps are skipped, and it would go ahead and update Visual Studio Code. So should we see these features in action? Let's start with the Skip and Update Others. So let's see. Here Chrome is running, Firefox is not. So we decide we don't want to quit those. We're going to skip and update others. So it skips over installing Chrome, it installs Firefox, and done. So that enables them to do that. Let's look at the assisted quit. So Chrome's still sitting there, needs to be updated. So if we click Update again, now notice Skip and Update Others is grayed out because there's no others to update. We can choose Quit Apps and Update. It quits Chrome, it updates it. Now I did the screen recording on just the Managed Software Center window, so you don't get to see that Chrome reopens, but trust me, it does. And then it reopens Chrome for the person. And you got to, I did not realize, a lot of our users don't realize that you can have Chrome preserve the tabs and reopen them, but a lot of users don't know that that actually works. Once you tell them, they're a little happier. I'd also thought I'd show you what it looks like when there are multiple items running blocking apps, just so you see what it looks like. So here we've got 4 different items all open. You know, our users never quit Slack, they never quit Zoom, and they never quit Chrome. And the developers never quit VS Code. So again, we're going to click Update All, and we see an entire list of them. It takes a little bit to quit some of them, and then it does it. I'm not going to go through the whole install, that's boring. And here's sort of a worst case scenario. So we've got a pending Apple update, and we've got a package that requires a restart for some reason, and we've got an app that's open. So we click Update All. Oh wait, see that? Oh, that's a little animation to prove that Chrome is open. We click Update All. Let's go. And First it tells you, hey, there's Apple updates. No, I'm going to skip those. Then it says, oh, there's ones that require a logout. Nah, I'm going to skip those too. And then probably they'll also do the skip, that thing, and then they'll update nothing. But they've got the options. They don't, there were no, and again, under your control. You don't have to enable these features. And let's look at one more variation here, because sometimes users may still need to manually quit something, or at least give a little assistance. And so here, when we try to update, Managed Software Center tells iTerm to quit, but iTerm pops up this dialog that says, are you sure? Are you sure you want to quit? And so if we don't do anything, after a while, Managed Software Center gives us this little thing that says, oh, you're going to have to do something manually. If you do, Managed Software Center sees that and can continue with the update. You can also optionally, again, under your control, enable a force quit button there so that instead of them having to manually quit it, they could click the force quit button. You'll have to decide whether that's something you want to trust your users with or not. I have not elected to turn that on where I am. I'm just, I guess I can see somebody clicking that, not realizing, oh, well, that unsaved document's gone too, and now they're mad at me because I didn't save them from that. All right, so all these new features are disabled by default, and the behavior is exactly as it was prior to Munki 7.1. And these are the preferences you can use to turn on and configure those new features. So the big new main one, of course, is that top one, offer to quit blocking apps. The force quit one enables that force quit button we just saw, and then the option to update things that aren't blocked, to skip those. You may decide you don't want that. You kind of want that carrot and stick, which is, yeah, you may want that new version of Zoom, but you also have to take the Chrome update and the Firefox update. And so you have to decide what works for your organization. And there's some new optional package info keys you can add to a package info to fine-tune this behavior too. Blocking applications, manual quit only. That's a really long key, but hopefully it explains, it's a little self-explanatory. If you add that to a package info, then Munki will not attempt to quit that. That will only be something that the user can, will be something that the user has to manually quit. So there may be some particular software that you just, either you know that managed software can't properly quit it, or there's some other reason why you don't want it to. If it's Managed Software Center can't for some reason, you might be able to work around that issue with the second key, which is the blocking applications quit script. So if you've got some piece of software that not only there's an app, but there's like, there's a menu bar app and there's this other helper thing, and all of that stuff needs to be quit, you could write a script that goes and quits all of those things. Do remember that Managed Software Center runs as the current GUI user. And so that script will also run as the current GUI user. So if some of the things that need to be quit are running as root, this isn't going to help you. You'll have to handle this other ways. But it is potentially an option. And you can learn more about the assisted app quit feature in the Munki Wiki. Managed Software Center in Munki 7.1 also has some changes around the display of Apple updates. How many people are using Munki to notify their users about Apple updates and that sort of thing? Not very many. A couple. Are people using things like Nudge? A lot of Nudge. People just using native like Apple DDM and nothing else. Yeah. A lot of these changes were for my own personal needs or my needs at my organization. I hope they're helpful to some people, but I understand that they're probably not helpful to a large number. But anyway, prior to to Munki 7.1, Apple updates and Munki updates were all displayed together in one group like that. And that was sort of misleading because you'd think when it's displayed like that, if I click update all, then I expect all of those things to be updated. But especially on Apple Silicon, it can't install the Mac OS update. So instead, what it would do is it would tell you, hey, some of these are important Apple updates. And then if you clicked Install Now, it would open up the software update preferences pane and then expect the user to do something there. And it would also quit Manage Software Center, which users may have found confusing. And if instead of clicking Install Now, they clicked Skip these updates, then the Apple update disappeared from the display, and then they still had to click Update another time to get it to work. It all was functional, but it was kind of clunky and potentially confusing. And since we were making a bunch of changes to the GUI in 7.1, I was just like, let's rip that Band-Aid off, and I want to make some more changes. So I did. So we moved the Apple updates into their own separate section. The button now says Show because it's not going to install it. It's just going to show it to you. Then the regular Munki updates in a different section where Update will actually just update those. So I think that's a little clearer from the user's perspective what's going to happen when they click those buttons. One more change around the display of Apple updates. Managed Software Center has for a long time had this little message for updates to tell people, hey, this update's 3 days old, 10 days old, 28 days old, 49 days old. And that worked really well for stuff like Chrome and Firefox and that sort of thing because the name of the product always stayed the same. So if people kept skipping, like Chrome gets an update at least once a week. If they kept ignoring the updates, that number would continue to go up until they update it. And you could also use what's the aggressive notifications based on that timing. But with Apple updates, the name changes. So it's Mac OS Tahoe 26.5.1, and then the next update is named Mac OS Tahoe 26. So Munki had a hard time kind of tracking that. And what would happen is people would skip updates, sometimes for a really long time. They're still running like Tahoe 7, 26.4. And so they're way behind. They're weeks and weeks behind. But that update really only just came out a few days ago. And so the user kind of has a false sense of security. They think, well, I'm not that far behind. What's the big deal? With Munki 7.1, we do a better job of tracking how long we've been out of date. So now the user gets a much scarier looking message. And again, if you've enabled the aggressive update notifications, in this particular case, it would probably go full screen, blur out the background, really force them to think about their choices before proceeding on with using the computer. All right, so that was Munki 7.1. I think that's vanilla. But it might be the Peachy Paterno. I'm not sure. But by the way, are you aware that you can get Penn State Creamery ice cream shipped to your house anywhere inside the lower 48 United States? They're not going to ship it to Australia, Nindy. I'm sorry. Is there anybody here from Hawaii or Alaska? You're out of luck. My team, last year my manager came to this conference and she did a presentation and she became aware of how much of the Berkey Creamery ice cream I ate last year. And our team has this nice tradition where we get everybody a birthday present in our team. So we all chip in a little bit of money and we try to think of clever birthday presents for people. There's one guy who's a big Donald Duck fan. He's French. I mean, that's his excuse. He's a big Donald Duck fan. And so we get him different Donald Duck things. This year we got him an actual cell made by the ink and paint department, Donald Duck telling him happy birthday. So this last year, my team decided that they were going to ship me a box that I opened up, and it had this, well, that's very interesting. What is that? That looks very familiar. And the styrofoam thing, and inside that there was a bunch of dry ice. And then there's a box underneath that dry ice, and you open up that box, and they shipped me Penn State Creamery ice cream. And so I very quickly stuffed it in my freezer, and you know, it lasted maybe a week or so. I don't know. But you know, think about that for yourselves, you know, or your significant others. It's not cheap, but yeah, it's worth it. All right, let's move on to Munki 7.2. This was released last week, and it really only adds one new feature. And that feature was a request from senior technology management where I work. So a person I couldn't really say no to, and one that I had to sort of prioritize. But it wasn't a terrible request. They wanted a way to be able to define a block of time during the day when they would not be interrupted by update notifications. And you know, I talked about how you can use Do Not Disturb, and you can make sure you install your updates that come out on these certain days. But she just wanted something that was very clear. I'm not going to be interrupted during this time frame. So I built a way to allow users to restrict update notifications to selected hours during the day. So right here, we're saying I can only be notified about updates from 8 a.m. to just before 11 a.m. Users, you don't have to select a single block of time. You can select different blocks of time. I suppose you could select 8 and not 9 and 10 and not 11. I don't know why you would do that, but you could. And you must select something. You can't close that window with nothing selected. You have to select at least 1 hour. And when I wrote that down on paper recently while working on this presentation, I was like, that's pretty arbitrary. Maybe some organizations want it to be, they have to select at least 2 hours, but we can't do that yet. Right now it has to be at least 1 hour. And like the new features in Munki 7.1, this feature is disabled by default. So if you do nothing, you won't see it. But you can enable it and configure it with some new Munki preferences. The first one is just whether the feature is turned on or not. The second two control what is displayed in that preferences window. So by default, if you do nothing, all 24 hours of the day are displayed. And people can pick anything in there. So of course, your nefarious users are going to pick 1 a.m. when they and their machine are asleep. And effectively, they will never get notified. Woo! They win. So you probably want to give a little more control to that. So in this example, we've set the allowed notification start to 8 and the end to 18. So now what is displayed is 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And the user has to pick a notification window inside what might be normal business hours for that organization. Of course, other organizations have different business hours. You could certainly, you could pick a range of time that crosses midnight, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. works just fine. If you use 24-hour time, these numbers will display as 24-hour time. It doesn't have to be American-style AM, PM. So I want to try to show a demo. The chances of this not looking right, behaving right, super high, but we're going to try. So, good. All right, first thing I'm going to do is launch Chrome and wait 4 hours for it to launch. It really, people say it's a really fast browser, and it's probably a fast browser, but man, it's slow to launch. All right, and it opened its window over here on the other screen, so I'll bring it over here to prove that it's open. All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to delete it while it's open. This is a little trick. It's open, but it's not there. So now Munki will want to install it because it's not there, but because it's running, it can't install it in the background. So this is not something you would do in normal, but this is just something to demonstrate this feature here. So I'm going to also make sure that our last notified date doesn't exist because Munki, at least the way I've got it configured, is only going to notify at most once a day. So I want to make sure that hasn't fired. So now let's run Managed Software Center, or Managed Software Update. And if the Wi-Fi isn't too terrible, it should be able to download Chrome in a reasonable amount of time. And this is where I was afraid this might go terribly, terribly wrong, so we're going to see. It's not going well so far. It should be much further along than this. I am seeing a little sign of life, but wow. We'll give it a little more time here. Anything around testing these notifications is really tedious because you have to continue to get the machine back into a state where it's going to notify, and then it doesn't go right, and then you have to figure out how to get the machine back into that state. While that's downloading, I am going to duck down behind this podium for a moment and plug in my laptop, which I kicked the plug out of. I don't think I actually need it because I'm at like 50%, but better safe than sorry. All right, I think I did that last year too, kicked it out. So, we're all the way up to 60%, woohoo. So anybody got any good jokes?
I think this is why your users never want to quit Chrome.
Yeah. Well, they don't see this, and it goes much faster at where I work.
But it took you a minute and a half to launch it, too.
Oh, Chrome? Yeah. Does Chrome not launch slowly for everybody else? It could be a me problem. I could be holding it wrong. All right. We're almost done. Okay. And so it couldn't install it because skipping install of Google Chrome because blocking applications running. And notice it didn't notify. And we can check that, what's going on there, by tailing the library, managed installs, log, managed software update log. And here at the end, can people read that? So user Neagle specified allowed notification hours of 8 and 9, current hour is 16. Skipping user notification because the current time is outside the allowed notification window. All right, so let's launch Managed Software Center and change our preferences here. See, when the preferences turned on, woohoo, there's now a settings menu. And then we'll add a couple more hours in here. It's after 4, so that should cover us. Close that, quit that, and now let's run Managed Software Center, or Managed Software Update again. And if everything goes right, we'll get a notification that there's a pending update. So we'll see. It doesn't have to download as much stuff this time around, so hopefully this part will go a little faster because it doesn't have to download Chrome. It already did that. Okay, we'll get a little bit closer to the end here. Dun, dun, dun. We're going to see if the demo works. It did! Yay! So we've got the software. Okay. So, not a world-beating feature, but maybe a little, quality of life thing that maybe your users will appreciate. I hope they do. All right, let's quit Chrome. I'm not going to bother updating it right now because it doesn't exist, so it can't be out of date. There we go. All right. So you can learn more about this new Munki feature in the Munki Wiki. And next time I say that, I expect you all to join in with me. All right. So Munki 7.2 was released last week. And so now we've caught up with what's new in Munki. So what might be new in the future? Last summer, Rod Christensen submitted a pull request to add YAML support to Munki. He wants Munki admins to be able to use YAML formatted manifests and package info files. And here's a sample manifest using the plist format that Munki has used for 15 plus years, 16 years or more actually. Same manifest using YAML. Package info file using the plist format, or a fraction of it. There's a lot more because a package info file has a lot of data in it. And again, YAML. Because of the complexity, maybe it doesn't look as simple as the manifest did. But a lot of admins find this a lot easier to read and write and understand. Rod is particularly motivated because he wrote something called Simian, which is basically Munki for Windows. And instead of using plist formatted files on Windows, plists would be weird on Windows, he decided to use YAML and then wanted to be able to do the same thing over on Mac OS. I think it's a fine idea. It's a huge PR. I suspect there was a lot of non-carbon help in building that PR. And I've had to prioritize some other work, but I do hope to get back to this soon. And this summer, start working with Rod to see if we can figure out how best to get this merged into Munki. And like everything else, it'll be opt-in. If we add the YAML support and you don't care about it, don't want to use it, you won't have to. You can still be able to use the old plist format as long as you want. So I mentioned the non-carbon help, and I can pretty confidently say that in the future, AI tools will be helping generate code that will be in Munki. And I can say that confidently because AI tools have already generated code that's in Munki. I've used it. And some ways I've used it with the Munki code base so far. Looking for typos. I pointed Claude at the Munki code base and said, can you just look for typos? This is the sort of task that's really boring, that humans don't want to do. I sure don't want to do it. Look through every single line of code and see if you can find any typos. And you're still going to miss them because that's why they're a typo. Your brain kind of error corrects and doesn't even notice that it's a typo. So that's a really, in my view, that's a fantastic task to hand over to an AI because they're not going to be bored by it. They're not going to complain about it. They'll just do it. Some of the code I wrote for some of the new features, especially this most recent feature with the notification windows, I asked Claude to review it. Can you take a look? Are there any obvious logic errors? Are there any obvious bugs? And it came back with a few suggestions. I've had it help me add additional tests to the code, and I'm prototyping some new features, and we'll look at that a little bit more detail in a moment. So the bug hunt, or the typo hunt, 2 recent commits just a few weeks ago. So it found some typos and comments. Big whoop, right? But it also found one, for years, no human had noticed that if you've got something prior to 7.2 installed on your machine, type manage software update -- help. And it actually, in the help message, misspells the name of manage software update. So that's kind of embarrassing. So we fixed that. And then one other of the typos actually fixed a bug. There was an if statement. If this thing equals, put something in quotes, then do something else. And the thing that was in quotes was misspelled. There was a typo there. So it was never going to equal that. And so that section of code was never, ever going to execute. So very useful to do that. I mean, I would have probably never found those on my own. I think today I'm going to look at every line of code and look for, I would have never done that. Some humans probably would have stumbled across them eventually. I mean, that's how most of the typos in the past have been found. But, handing that task off to a soulless machine just felt right. So I've also used it for prototyping a new feature. And that feature was this notification window thing. So let's look at what I thought the requirements were here. So I was asked to design this feature. And I was talking to my manager and talking to some other people about how we thought it should work, what kind of flexibility should there be, what sort of options there were. And we kind of came up with this list. And we wanted some sort of UI that allowed people to select the desired hours for notifications. They had to select at least 1 hour. We didn't want it fine-grained, so they would, hey, I only wanted a notification from 7:15 to 8:37. Yeah, we didn't want any of that stuff. The hours didn't have to be a continuous range. I wanted to encourage people to go, well, yeah, I could get a notification in the morning or in the late afternoon. That's fine. We also knew that the admins, especially if this was going out to the world and not just something that Disney Animation used, admins should be able to restrict that, should be able to control some of those choices. And I wanted it to look like, you know, a natural native macOS UI. I didn't want it to look like something generated, you know, for some other platform. So my first thought was, okay, we'll just use a standard date time picker. You know, that's a native control that Apple gives you in AppKit. But this really only gives you a single range. I mean, maybe we could have added a plus button and then it could add additional rows. And also the native picker, you could pick minutes, and I didn't want that. It was not clear how you would encourage people to select at least 1 hour in there. I mean, you could do tricks, but it might not be intuitive to the user what was happening. They might be trying to select something that wouldn't let them. So I didn't like that. And my next thought was, okay, we could just use a pop-up menu instead of a date picker, and those could just be hard-coded to 8 a.m., 9 a.m., so on. So now we didn't have to worry about minutes being picked, but still all the same other problems in that you can't do a range, and again, hard to figure out how to enforce at least 1 hour being selected. So then super clunky, we could just do this, right? And just a bunch of checkboxes, and this would work. You know, it would let it lets them select, you know, any random selection of hours. We could set it up so that when we got down to a single checkbox, it would either ignore it or pop up a dialog saying, nope, you have to leave at least one selected. So it solved all the problems, but it looks like crap. So I thought, well, here's another control that you can pull out of the AppKit toolbox. It's called the NS segmented control. It's often used as a tab bar or a navigation bar in like the setup assistant type thing where you go from pane to pane to pane, but it could be abused in this way. And this solves most of the issues. It looks like a timeline, sort of, but I didn't like how each hour is separate, and you couldn't drag select. You had to click each thing you wanted to select, or you had to unclick them, and I didn't like that. So but I had no idea what to do, and I figured, well, I've got to write a custom control, but I've never done that before. I have no idea how to start. And if you do any writing at all, or if you work on presentations, this is the worst thing ever. The starting point. It's blank. You know, okay, now I've started my code file. How do you start? That's the hardest part. So I asked Claude Code to help. And I wish I had saved the actual prompt that I'd given Claude. I didn't know I was going to be giving this talk and putting AI in it. But it was something along these lines. It was probably a little bit more detailed than this. And then Claude went out and did its weird cogitating and flugelbarring and all these weird words that it uses, and eventually spit out some Swift code, which I dropped into a sample app, and then I ran it, and it looked like this. Now, does that look great? No. But I could drag select. It covered the time range. I could get the values back at it. It was a starting point. It might not look exactly like I wanted to, but it worked, and it had something I could start tweaking. I could go, okay, I want it. I don't want it to look like this. I want it narrower. I want different colors. I want all that sort of thing. But that was it. It's just getting past that initial hurdle of starting. And eventually we got to this. And I'm going to switch again quick and bring up Managed Software Center and point out the things that the functionality that I was talking about here. So if that's not checked, that whole thing's gone. I can drag select or drag deselect. I can still do the individual fun stuff. And if I try to deselect that last one, it won't let me. So it always has at least one. Should it maybe have done something else? Should it beep at you? I don't know, maybe. But I think hopefully it's clear enough that people understand that they've got to select something. But another thing that I learned is, okay, so I built this thing, and then I got some feedback that that it didn't work very well with some of the accessibility settings, that it was hard to see, hard to read when certain accessibility settings were set. And then I realized also that it didn't work with keyboard navigation, that you had to click. So there was another, talking to Claude, not entirely just Claude, but and reading a lot of stuff in Apple's documentation to figure out how to add keyboard navigation, and also figure out how to make sure it looked right in different accessibility settings. So let's look at a couple of those quickly. So we'll go down to accessibility, and we're going to first look at display, and we're going to do increase contrast and then yank it all the way up to maximum. And so that looks horrible to me, but you can at least still read it. And the initial version of it, you couldn't. Once you cranked all the contrast all the way up, the selected and deselected things looked the same. So I had to learn about that. Let's turn that back. And then also figuring out how to, let's go back to, where I want is keyboard this time. There's other ways to do this, but let's do it in keyboard. We'll turn on full keyboard or keyboard navigation. And for whatever reason, it doesn't pick it up immediately. I might have to quit. Or that's not what I want to do. I have to quit and then relaunch it. But so we can tab through the interface, and we can use that's space bar to, and I'm using arrow keys to move around. But it lets you know really how much you should not write your own controls, because Apple has solved all of these problems. No. Apple has solved many of these problems for you in their own controls, and if you write your own now, you've got to solve them as well. And so I learned some stuff there, and yes, and I sometimes would ask Claude, and it did a lot of gaslighting. It would tell me, yeah, this works, and then I would run it, and I would say, it's not doing what you said it was doing. Oh, my mistake. Try this. Just exhausting, but it jump-started the learning process for me. All right, let's go back to here. Good. And so here's the finished custom control in Managed Software Center. And like I said, Claude Code got me started, but I'm still responsible for the shipping code. I put my name on it. I don't put Claude's name on it. So if it's broken, it's my fault, not Claude's. All right. So there have been several sessions here at the conference talking about AI. I've been talking with people for the last couple of days, and AI keeps coming up again and again and again. And so, do I have some concerns about using AI for this sort of thing? Sure, absolutely I do. Absolutely I do. I'm ambivalent. I don't want to completely ignore it because I think it could be a valuable tool. But I have no visibility. I asked Claude to help me this. I have no idea how much that cost in terms of tokens or resources. That could have been $10,000 to implement that feature. I don't know. How many communities don't have water today because of the data center that was required to add. I don't know these things, and I want to. I think the only way we're going to get to a point where we have sort of rational discussions about AI is we need to really see the actual, not only the cost of the running of it, but the cost of building it in the first place. Is that really worth it? I think it was Tim I was talking to yesterday, and yeah, and his point is that, or one of his points that he brought up, which I absolutely agreed with, is, it's great to have this thing that can help you out, But if you don't know the cost, if you've spent tens of thousands of dollars to do what a human could have probably done for a lot less, what have we gained there other than just putting some human out of work? And there's lots of questions about the ethics around how these things were trained. Where they were built on the labor of all of us, and yet do we get all of that benefit back? I don't know. I love this meme here. I think I get joy out of writing code that solves a problem or builds a thing. It's the same sort of joy I would get out of building anything else. Building a table from wood as a woodworker, or assembling a Lego kit or something like that. If you don't get joy out of writing code, then yeah, I can see absolutely the appeal of being able to tell Claude, hey, can you write this for me? But if you do, I think be careful how you use Claude, because it can suck all the joy out of what you're doing here. And I think it also, another concern I have is how does that affect not only future people? How do they learn to code? How do they learn to be a Mac admin if we're only letting AI do this sort of thing? And just the human relationships that you don't have anymore. Instead of talking to another human, hey, I can't figure out how to do this thing in AppKit, and I talk to another human. Sure, it's easier to talk to Claude, but Claude's not going to buy me a beer tomorrow. So, I mean, that's a pretty crass way to say it, but there are other values or other benefits to encouraging human relationships here rather than just, having our computers do it all for us. All right. That's all I have to talk about today. Thank you. My understanding is that truck has left for the day, so I'm sorry to torture you with that there. Questions? Anybody have any questions? I guess I've got a fun little box here. All right, I'm not going to try to throw it the whole way there, but we'll see what happens. Whoa! Not too bad.
Was there any consideration of maybe limiting the length of time that people can defer, or in other words, like reset after a day or a week or something like that, so you don't have somebody who's perpetually being notified 1 hour?
Yeah, there was consideration of that. I was sort of under a deadline to implement this by a certain time. Not a real hard deadline, but let's say just highly encouraged by certain people that it would be a good idea to get something out there. And yeah, I could have spent another several months thinking about all the possible, use cases and tweaking. It certainly is something that could be added in the future, And I'm not sure necessarily, because I haven't done the full testing, how all of this interacts with some of the other notification stuff that Munki does. But yeah, I personally think, yes, that would make a lot of sense, that when, if they've been ignoring updates for some period of time, then start ignoring their window and just notify them whenever. Another organization might feel differently about that, and so that would be more preferences to implement. Totally doable, just didn't do it. Anybody else got anything? So Trevor's here and somebody way there in the back. So Trevor, make sure you throw it all the way to the back next.
Yep.
Okay.
The notification window feature is awesome.
Okay.
It looks like it's hard to discover as a user, right?
That was on purpose.
Okay. So you also showed, custom sidebar item features.
Yep.
Is there any way to get it to
Absolutely,
show on that
there
sidebar?
is. There is a new Munki URL, Munki://settings, that will open that window. You could put that
Fantastic.
lots of different places to make it easier to get there. I did not want people to use this
Understandable.
feature unless they really knew. You know, it's like, yes, we've delivered this, but we're still keeping it slightly a secret. But you could make it more.
Are you getting a kickback for shilling for the creamery
No,
like
no.
this?
No, I wish. That would be nice. No.
Next.
Way there in the back.
Good throw. As someone who is currently not deploying Munki in their environment, but is seriously considering it, I'm curious what your philosophy around notification fatigue is. I know you talked about breaking up software updates to third-party patching, and then you mentioned DDM. We're using DDM now. Obviously, you're getting native prompting from that. What's the philosophy around notification fatigue at Walt Disney?
My particular philosophy is to try to get all those notifications in one place. And there was sort of a time period, and this was several years ago, when that was reasonably possible, that Munki could do it all. You know, Munki could install, Adobe apps, it could install Apple updates, it could install third-party updates. So Managed Software Center could be the only thing that ever notified them. And so you could control that. But now we have less control over that. I still try to get as much into Managed Software Center as possible so that people aren't being notified by and so many apps want to do the auto updating and notifying. And if you can find a configuration profile to turn that off, I do, at least as much as I can. But yeah, I agree that if it's a lot of noise when everything is saying update me, update me, update me, and we can't be mad at users for wanting to tune some of that noise out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Over here?
Can I ask a quick question?
Well, okay.
How'd you get to 7.2 with no user preferences at all in a user-facing app?
Because in my mind, the user shouldn't have any preferences. This should be, it's Managed Software Center. This is the admin should have the preferences, not the user, but.
For the user notification window, if you have it specified like you did from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., is that 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. on the other side part of their exclusion window, or are they getting bothered during that time?
They don't get notified there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's only the times that are selected.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's something to consider. Do you want that?
Perfect. Thank you.
My thinking behind that is simply, for most of our users, they shouldn't be working outside of those hours. So the fact that they're not being notified during those hours isn't that big a deal.
I work in marketing.
Yeah. Well.
We never stop.
Right. So you would give them a much wider window,
Yes.
I suppose. The marketing users would have 7 a.m. to midnight or something.
Yep.
Anybody else? We've got 1 minute. All right. Thank you, everyone. Favorite ice cream? Oh, question, favorite ice cream? Ooh, I think Alumni Swirl. Yeah.